The time has come for our final chapter of our story, Little House in the Big Woods. And I love this chapter. It always makes me cry at the end. It's so sweet. Okay, so this is chapter 13, and it's called The Deer in the Wood. The grass was dry and withered, and the cow must be taken out of the woods and kept in the barn to be fed. All the bright-colored leaves became dull brown when the cold fall rains began. There was no more playing under the trees, but Pa was in the house when it rained, and he began again to play the fiddle after supper. Then the rain stopped. The weather grew colder. In the early mornings, everything sparkled with frost. The days were growing short, and the little fire burned all day in the cook stove to keep the house warm. Winter was not far away. The attic and the cellar were full of good things once more, and Laura and Mary had started to make patchwork quilts. Everything was beginning to be snug and cozy again. One night, when he came in from doing the chores, Pa said that after supper, he would go to his deer lick and watch for a deer. There had been no fresh meat in the little house since spring, but now the fawns were grown up, and Pa would go hunting again. Pa had made a deer lick in the open place in the woods, with trees nearby in which he could sit and watch. A deer lick was a place where the deer came to get salt. When they found a salty place in the ground, they came there to lick it, and that was called a deer lick. Pa had made one by sprinkling salt over the ground. After supper, Pa took his gun and went into the woods, and Laura and Mary went to sleep without any stories or music. As soon as they woke up in the morning, they ran to the window, but there was no deer hanging in the trees. Pa had never before gone out to get a deer and come home without one. Laura and Mary did not know what to think. And all day, Pa was busy banking the little house in the barn with dead leaves and straw held down by stones to keep out the cold. The weather grew colder all day. So here's Pa. So what he's doing is he's putting like another layer down to keep them warm. He puts down leaves and straw, the bottom of the house, and then he puts rocks on top of it. So it's sort of like insulation. It's another layer to keep out the cold. The weather grew colder all day, and that night once more, when the fire in the hearth and the windows were shut tight and chinked for the winter. After supper, Pa took Laura on his knee while Mary sat close in the little chair, and Pa said, "Now I'll tell you why you had no fresh meat to eat today. When I went out to the deer lick, I climbed up into a big oak tree. I found a place on a branch where I was comfortable and I could watch the deer lick. I was near enough to shoot any animal that came to it, and my gun was loaded and ready on my knee. There I sat, and I waited for the moon to rise and light the clearing. I was a little tired from chopping wood all day yesterday, and I must have fallen asleep, for I found myself opening my eyes. The big round moon was just rising. I could see it between the bare branches of the trees low in the sky, and right against it I saw a deer standing. His head was up, and he was listening. His great branching horns stood out above his head. He was dark against the moon. It was a perfect shot, but he was so beautiful. He looked so strong and free and wild that I couldn't kill him. I sat there and looked at him until he bounded away into the dark wood. Then I remembered that Ma and my little girls were waiting for me to bring home some good fresh venison. I made up my mind the next time I would shoot. After a while, a big bear came lumbering out into the open. He was so fat from feasting on berries and roots and grubs all summer that he was nearly as large as 2 bears. His head swayed from side to side as he walked on all fours across the clear space in the moonlight until he came to a rotten log. He smelled it and listened. Then he pawed it apart and sniffed among the broken pieces, eating up the fat white grubs. Then he stood up on his hind legs, perfectly still, looking all around him. He seemed to be suspicious that something was wrong. He was trying to see or smell what it was. He was a perfect mark to shoot at, but I was so much interested in watching him, and the woods were so peaceful in the moonlight that I forgot all about my gun. I did not even think of shooting him until he was waddling away into the woods. Oh, this will never do, I thought. I'll never get meat this way. I settled myself in the tree again and waited. This time I was determined to shoot the next game I saw. The moon had risen higher, and the moonlight was bright in the little open place. All around it, the shadows were dark among the trees. After a long time, a doe and her yearling fawn came stepping daintily out of the shadows. They were not afraid at all. They walked over to the place where I had sprinkled the salt, and they both licked up a little bit of it. They raised their heads, and they looked at each other. The fawn stepped over and stood beside the doe. They stood there together, looking at the woods in the moonlight. Their large eyes were shining and soft. And here's a picture of Pa in the tree. And the deer and the fawn. I just sat there looking at them until they walked away among the shadows. Then I climbed down out of that tree and came home. Laura whispered in his ear, "I'm glad you didn't shoot them." Mary said, "We can eat bread and butter." Pa lifted Mary up out of her chair and hugged them both together. "You're my good girls," he said, "and now it's bedtime. Run along while I get my fiddle." When Laura and Mary had said their prayers and were tucked snugly under the trundle bed's cover, Pa was sitting in the firelight with the fiddle. Ma had blown out the lamp because she did not need its light. On the other side of the hearth, she was swaying gently in her rocking chair, and her knitting needles flashed in and out above the socks she was knitting. The long winter evening of firelight and music had come again. Pa's fiddle wailed while Pa sang on. "Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. I'm going to California, the gold dust for to see." Then Pa began to play again the song about Old Man Grimes, but he did not sing the words he had sung when Ma was making cheese. He sang different words now. Pa's sweet voice was singing softly and strong. "Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? And days of old lang syne, my friend, and days of old lang syne. Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne." You may have heard that song. Sometimes people sing it at New Year's. When the fiddle had stopped singing, Laura called out softly, "Pa, what are days of old lang syne?" "Those are the days of a long time ago, Laura," Pa said. "Go to sleep now." So the song is asking, should your old acquaintance, that means like old friends you knew, be forgot and you would never think of them, never brought to mind? Will you forget about the old days? Will you forget the things that are happening? But Laura lay awake a while, listening to Pa's fiddle softly playing and to the lonely sound of the wind in the big woods. She looked at Pa sitting on the bench by the hearth, the firelight gleaming on his brown hair and his beard and glistening on the honey brown fiddle. She looked at Ma, gently rocking and knitting. Laura thought to herself, this is now. She was glad that the cozy house and Pa and Ma and the firelight and the music were now. They could not be forgotten, she thought, because now is now. It can never be a long time ago. So sweet. So that's the end. So what Laura's saying at the end of the story is like she's just happy it's now, and she can't imagine a time when she's older and a lot of time has gone by when she doesn't remember what's happening right now because she's just really taking in the moment of today. So it's actually a really good message for us to just be thankful for what we have right now, here and now, today. I know we're all isolated, but as she describes it, we're all snug and cozy in our homes. We're with our family, and you know, let's make the most of it and always remember it. Okay, so I love, love, love this book, and this is the beginning of a series. As I've told you guys, there's so many good books. So the next one's actually called Little House on the Prairie. Dun, dun, dun. So maybe you guys want to hear this one next. Post your comments. If you want to keep going with the story, I would love to read this one next. In 3rd grade, you'll read On the Banks of Plum Creek, which is the 3rd book in the series. So we could read this one together too. Next week, I think I'll read you guys some poetry. We'll take a little bit of a break and read some poetry, though, because it is National Poetry Month in April. So that would be fun. But if you want to hear the story, I love these books. And this one is just as good. And they move, as you can tell, from the big woods. They're going to go now and try life on the prairie, which is very opposite because it's big open field with just miles and miles of sky and fields. And they're so used to living in dense woods. So it'll be interesting. Okay, miss everybody. I really hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you can think about what Laura was thinking about and really take in tonight and enjoy today and tonight and your family and make your house cozy and special. Okay.